Okay, so this is find square roots, and basically we've got some definitions here. A perfect square. A perfect square is the result of multiplying an integer by itself. Okay, so 3 squared, we probably remember this from before, but we always get, that means 3 times 3, and 3 times 3 is 9, right? Same with negative 3 squared. So remember that if we only square the number that's in the parentheses. So in this case, we're actually multiplying negative 3 times negative 3. And we get, again, negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. Okay? So that's a perfect square. But the reason we want to know what a perfect square is because we want to know how to define square root. Okay? And the square root is simply the number multiplied by itself that results in the radicand. Okay? And this is probably a new term for you. If not, that's okay. But radicand is the number underneath the radical symbol. Okay? So here's our radical symbol. So here we have the square root, and we can read it as the square root of 9 or the root of 9, either way. But in this case, we always want to think of this, and the way I always think of it, and this will help you later, is mathematicians are really lazy. Whenever there's no number right there, it's a 2. It's an invisible 2, okay? So we usually see that with x's. When there's no number in front of x, it's always a 1. Well, mathematicians even get lazy with this symbol, and there should be a 2 there. So what that means is we want the square root of 9, okay? And again, the square root of 9 is when we want to find what number multiplied by itself. So again, you can think of this as the square root of, well, what number times itself gives us 9? Well, we just did that, right? 3 times 3 gives us 9. So really, 3 squared, the square root of 3 squared, and again, that is 3, right? This should all be review, but we just want to make sure that we understand exactly what the square root means, because it's possible that in the future you get something that looks like this, okay? And this is the cube root, or the third root, which means that we need to find what number times itself 3 times is that, okay? So, let's look at some other examples. Example number 3. Again, you're going to be asked to find the square root, and we just have real simple ones here. We have the square root of 81, and again, we want to be thinking what number times itself. Well, I know that 9 times 9 gives me 81, and that is exactly what times itself equals 81. So I get 9 for that one, okay? And I also have b up here, which is just another square root, but it's plus or minus, and that's how we always read. Whenever you have a plus sign over a negative sign or a minus sign, you read it as plus or minus, or positive or negative, okay? So it's positive or negative square root of 49. Well, again, we know that the square root of 49, or what number times itself equals 49? Well, 7 times 7 equals 49, right? So, again, in this case, though, we don't want to forget that we have positive or negative. So, 7 times 7, so that means I can get rid of the square root sign. So, my answer is plus or minus, or positive or negative 7, okay? Example number 4, it says approximate the square root. Okay, so now here we have a number that's not a perfect square, okay? But I do know that the square root of 49, which is very close to 51, equals 7. And what number after 7 gives us the next square root? Well, 8 times 8 is 64. So since 51 is between these two numbers, I know that the answer has to lie somewhere between these numbers, okay? Which one is it going to be closer to? And that's how I'm going to approximate my square root. Well, 51 is a lot closer to 49 than it is to 64. So if I'm going to approximate the square root of 51, I'm going to say it's somewhere around, and we use a wavy equal sign for that. It means approximately. So approximately it's 7. And we're just going to choose the number that's closest to it for now. Okay, that's what approximating is. We're getting close to the answer. Later on in the year, towards the end, we'll actually find the exact answer for that. Okay, but for now, we're just going to approximate. So B, now I have a negative square root. Okay, and again, this negative means our answer is going to be negative. So first, we have to work this out here. Square root of 65. And again, there is no square root of 65, but we know that the square root of 64 is 8. Well, what's one number up from 8? Well, that's 9. What's 9 times 9? That's 81, right? So the square root of 65 is somewhere between the square root of 64 and the square root of 81. Again, I look at my numbers. 65 is a lot closer to 64 than it is to 81. So do I want to approximate it as 8 or do I want to approximate it as 9? Well, it's a lot closer to the square root of 64, which means I want to say that it is approximately 8. Okay? And that's all we're going to be doing here for approximating square roots as well as finding square roots. Okay? But again, I didn't write definitions down for radicand, but I did point out what it is. You will be expected to know that. And you should be able to do problems just like this. Okay? So this has been finding square roots.